The next speaker is going to deliver closing remarks is François Wisard from Switzerland, from the History Unit of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, the historian himself, and François.
Thank you. Good evening, I should say to everybody. As you may know, more than 15 years ago, Switzerland created a historical commission with the aim to further clarify its role during and after the Holocaust. The official name of this commission was the Independent Commission of Experts, Switzerland's Second World War. The commission was chaired by Professor Jean-François Wisard. It is often named after the Berger Commission. First, I would like to briefly tell you what I am going to do and what I am not going to do. It is not my intention to provide you with a detailed presentation of the scientific results of the commission. There are more than 10,000 pages. I've read them all, but you can find them on the internet as a synthesis on the internet. Some findings and some interpretation by the commission have led to criticism, also among historians. I will not get into this debate either. I think it's much more interesting to focus on questions linked to scientific policy, dealing with the past or searching for the historical truth. What in German is called the Vergangenheitsbewältigung, are expressions that sound good and you would hardly find someone who disagrees. However, it has always been my conviction that we must look behind such terms or phrases to see what the real meaning is. And to do so rather by focusing on questions, challenges, difficulties of such process, than by presenting or discussing the results. So, I will say a few words about the Swiss experience in this regard, hoping that it will give some food for thought to people from other countries, not only for policymakers, but also for historians. I will have 4 specific questions, which are of course closely linked together. First, the field of research, or the mandate given to the Commission. Second, the question of access to archives, and the fate of archival material collected by the Commission. Third, publication of the results. And fourth, statements given or measures undertaken by the government. 2 last introductory remarks. I do not address the question of the origins or the circumstances of the creation of the Commission. Let me just mention that in the context that led to the creation, the setup of the Commission, historical investigation on the one hand and restitution and indemnization, on the other hand, of Holocaust victims were closely linked. So, first point, the field of research mandate. This was defined in several phases. First, there was a decision taken by the Swiss Parliament on 13 December 1996 to create a commission. It was a unanimous decision of Parliament, a federal decree on, I quote, historical and legal research. The mandate, as defined by the Parliament in this decision, was, I quote here, to investigate the volume and fate of assets moved to Switzerland before, during, and immediately after Second World War from a historical and legal point of view. It covered assets of victims of the Nazi regime, as well as assets of the perpetrators and their collaborators. The possibility for the government or for the Commission to add new topics was granted, as well as to task the Commission to focus primarily on certain issues. The purpose here was to keep in line with newly revealed facts or with the findings of other research commissions abroad. However, the field of research is defined, let's say, in a rather narrow way, to focus on assets and on the fate. 1 week later, 1 week after the Parliament's decision, the government proceeded with the implementation. Firstly, it appointed the members of the Commission. There were 9 altogether, 5 Swiss citizens and 4 not. 8 experts were historians, and the 9th a lawyer. Secondly, the government defined a mandate with more details, a list of more than 20 topics, ranging from gold transactions to refugee policy and the arms industry was established. All in all, this mandate was rather broader than the one given by the Parliament, and addressing general issues rather than specific questions. So the scope and the framework were given by the government. However, according to the government's decision, the Commission established its work plan, timetable, and program of research on its own. A deadline was put, 5 years. So the Commission had to conduct its researches and to publish its results in the next 5 years. Such a broad scope of research raises the questions of financial means given to the Commission. These means were considerably increased. Initially, 5 million Swiss francs were provided for the research. Additional 17 million Swiss francs were approved some months later. So the Commission had only known some 20 million euro at the current rate, exchange rate. So the definition of the mandate and the scope of the research were influenced in 2 ways. First, by official reports that had been published previously or simultaneously. Second, the interpretation of the mandate, what belongs to the mandate and what doesn't, was an issue discussed in the Parliament and in the media. I will now present in detail these 2 points. There were 3 other official research work carried out previously or simultaneously. First, the Independent Committee of Eminent Persons, or ICEP, chaired by an American, Paul Volcker. The ICEP was set up following a memorandum of understanding between Jewish organizations and the Swiss Bankers Association. It was signed in May 1996, so half a year before the creation of the Berger Commission. The ICEP, the Volcker Committee, appointed independent audit companies and the Swiss Bankers Association ensured that the auditors gained unfettered access to all relevant files in Swiss banking institutions regarding possible dormant accounts deposited there before, during, and immediately after the Second World War. The ICEP published its report at the end of 1999. So in the course of the work of the Berger Commission, its investigation led the ground to the measures of restitution of bank accounts. To put it briefly, the ICEP, or the Volcker Committee, would deal with individual bank accounts and restitutions, and the IC, or the Berger Commission, would rather deal with the historical context. Second, the State Commission report on Lutidat. The study was written by Swiss historians, Thomas Wombert, and was available about 2 years after the Berger Commission had started its own investigations. This study led to the establishment of a contact point for Lutidat by the Federal Office of Cultures in early 1999. This contact point is still active and has recently published in cooperation with the History Unit of Third Department of Foreign Affairs a report on provenance research in Swiss museums. So there was a cooperation between this historian and the Berger Commission. It delivered its own report in 2001. To briefly compare both reports, the Commission dealt not only with questions of looted assets, as Womberger did, but also with the so-called flight assets, so cultural assets transferred to Switzerland by their local owners in an attempt to prevent them from being seized by the Nazi authorities. Also, it has also access to private archives. I'll come to that point later. The Commission's scientific results on Lutigard were very similar to that of Womberg. And certainly, a few months before the creation of the Commission estate, Commission study was conducted by two historians, Peter Hoog and Mark Perry. The research objective was to establish possible links between assets of victims of war and the Holocaust and compensation agreements with some Eastern European states. The study was published at the same time the Commission was created. Eventually, based on the study's result, the government published a list of about 500 dormant bank accounts, alongside with legal possibility to claim for restitution. So I do not enter here into many details which were the bank accounts, etc., but the two main points are the scope of these three official research reports, so on bank accounts, on Lutigard, as well as combination with bank accounts and compensation agreement, was rather clearly and narrowly defined. And all three reports led to specific measures or decisions. There were also debates on the scope of the mandate. So questions would arise, is this particular topic included or not in the mandate? Such difficulties arose very soon in the Parliament. So for example, the very day of the decision by the Parliament, one of its members asked the following questions. I quote, "Of course, the mandate focuses on assets, but it is just as important that the Commission deals with the question of Jewish refugees that were turned back at the Swiss border. Should that question not also be part of the mandate?" The government replied, yes, of course, it is a part of the mandate. And actually, the government tasked the Commission to deal in priority with two topics. Gold transactions, so that's a goal, especially those of the Swiss National Bank, and the refugee policy. The Commission published reports on those two issues earlier than on other issues. Furthermore, a member of the Parliament asked whether the brief report of the Commission on the fate of Sinti and Roma in connection with the refugee policy was or not a part of the mandate. The government replied that this issue was part of the mandate even if Sinti and Roma were not explicitly mentioned in the mandate. I could give more examples of such questions on the scope of the mandate, but I wish to point out it was defined very broadly and led to some controversies on its interpretation. The question, however, was of importance because the mandate was linked to a privileged access to archives. When the Parliament created the Commission, defined its mandate, it also opened relevant private archives to the Commission, and only to the Commission. So this brings me to the second point. The one of access to archives. So special legal provisions applied in Switzerland for the Commission's work. A general obligation to preserve documents and provide access to files and documents was imposed to legal entities, such as banks and insurance companies. The federal decree, so the decision of the Parliament, contained criminal provisions for those holders who would not comply with this obligation. All in all, 100 or more historians worked for the Berger Commission, of course not all full-time, but more than 100, and did research in archives located in Switzerland and in several other countries: Germany, France, the USA, Russia, etc. So for the first time in the country's history, private archives had to be open to historians for 5 years, the legal duration of the federal decree. As far as I know, of the 20 or more historians commission which dealt with the Holocaust, only 2 have been given access to private archives based on legal decision. So the Swiss Commission, the Commission of Switzerland, and the Commission of Liechtenstein, which was established a few years later. So this window of opportunity, that is a privileged access during 5 years to private archives, was of course used by historians of the Commission. And it had an impact on the research actually conducted. I quote here the Commission: in terms of organizing the work and making strategic decisions, it was crucial for the Commission to work primarily in those areas that had been newly opened through the privileged access to archives. The focus here was on the corporate archives of the private sector. And of course, the question may be raised: if you have to give an overall picture and to give priority then to one kind of archives, does it have an incidence in the picture itself? As well as for the definition of the scope of the mandate. In these few minutes, a question arose concerning the access to private archives. Which ones are the private archives relevant for the research? As for banks and insurance companies, there was no doubt. But what about chemical companies or food industries, for instance, whose subsidiaries in the Third Reich may have been involved with slave labor as with measures of Aryanization, were not mentioned in the federal decree, which listed entities that have to preserve documents and provide access to these records. But Aryanization measures were one of the topics listed by the government. So a dispute between the Commission and those companies arose concerning the access to their archives. So the final result was an agreement between those companies and the Commission. Access to archives would be guaranteed. Historians would be allowed to take notes on everything and to publish whatever they want, but the Commission had to return all the copies made. Previously, the Commission had concluded an agreement with the Swiss Federal Archives stating that all materials gathered by it were to be given to them. So both agreements, contradictory, contained a provision by which the final decision remained with the government. And this was in compliance with the federal decree, so the decision of the Parliament, according to which it was to the government to decide over the control, to decide over the fate of the materials related to the research. The Federal Council, so the government, reached here 2 main decisions. In July 2001, so before the end of the work of the Commission, it took a decision on the copies made by the Commission in private archives. As I told you, the Commission itself concluded an agreement with some of the owners of private archives, stated that it will give the copies back. The Federal Council decided to grant each company in which the Commission had made copies of documents, approximately 100 companies, the right to request that they be returned to them. Several dozens of companies made use of that right. One of the consequences is that no one can be shown to be working exactly on the same scientific material as the Belgian Commission did. When it comes, for example, to verifying or discussing the results. before the copies were given back, a complete list of the documents, copies of the documents, was established and is kept at the Federal Archives. The government took a second decision in 2004. Do I speak too loud or no?
I cannot believe what he hears.
In 2004, the Federal Council decided that all other scientific material gathered by the Commission and which is kept at the Swiss Federal Archives would be freely accessible starting immediately. I come to the third point. I will be quicker on the last two. Publication of the results. Which results were published? By decision of the Parliament, the government has to publish its entirety, the results of the commission researches. There was only one exception. Personal data will be published anonymously if requested by living persons' interests, which are predominantly worthy of protection, only concern the victims. So, for example, here in the report on the refugees, the names of some victims were not revealed. So manuscripts of the report were provided to the federal administration, and a legal expert looked at the personal data. Solutions were elaborated in close cooperation with the Commission. But so it was not the model. The Commission gives its report to the government, and then the government waits some months and decide to publish or not, and we do not know whether it published its results in fact or not. It had been granted by Parliament that all the results of the commissions would be published. So we expected to know personal data. Now, in which form were the results published? So the Commission, as we know, had 5 years to publish its report and to address in priority 2 issues: gold transactions and refugee policies. So it published 2 interim reports on those issues in 1998 and 1999. They are available in book form and online free of charge. The distribution here was handled by the Publication Office of the Federal Administration. The final report consists of 25 volumes of studies and of 1 synthesis. For its final report, the Commission wanted a private publisher. The chosen publisher could provide a better layout, but no online access. Moreover, due to the sheer size of the results, the Commission expressed the wish to have a publication in 3 stages. Not 25 in one, but 7 or 8, even 7 or 8. The government agreed, and so the final report was gradually published between August 2001 and March 2002. The 25 volumes, including updated versions of the interim report on gold and on refugees, exist only in 1 language, either German or French. Since the mandate stressed the need to conduct an investigation from a historical and from a legal point of view, 2 of the 25 volumes gathered legal analysis of particular topics. So the synthesis was translated, as is available in 4 languages, even online. It is also called Final Report, and the title reads Switzerland, National Socialism and the Second World War. So what was new in State Commission studies with the Belgian Commission? To propose an overall analysis. The Commission herself, as well as many experts, agree on the following points. The reports of the Commission do add new knowledge on certain specific topics, provide more details or nuance, but do not change the overall picture as it was already known by historians. But it had rather disseminated this picture into a broader audience. Come to point on statements and the measures taken, we've seen that the Swiss government and Swiss banks have taken several measures in terms of bank accounts and looted documents, already prior to the work of the Commission or in the course of its research. The Swiss National Bank paid 100 million Swiss francs into a humanitarian fund to help needy Holocaust victims. A legal framework and money, $1.25 billion were provided by a global settlement between two Swiss banks and Jewish organizations in 1998-1999. Based on that settlement, account owners, but also refugees, victims of slave labor and former owners of looted assets were entitled to claim for restitution or compensation. The results of the investigations, so of the Court Committee I said, were used in that context. So the final report of the Commission, the Belgian Commission, contains several critical appreciations of the attitude of the government during and after the war, in particular on the refugee policies and on conflicts. But it makes no recommendations, not even from restitutions. At the end, on the final report, we can read, I quote here, the task of the Commission did not include clarification in individual cases of what belonged to whom or direct involvement with the material restitution of dormant accounts and of cultural and other assets. End of quote. However, the governmental decisions of 1996, so that the creation of the Commission required that the Commission inform him if, in the course of its investigations, the Commission had found specific indications of property claims. In its final report, however, in footnote, the Commission stated that it had not found anything to suggest property claims, and therefore there had been no reason to inform the government. So we can see that the measures that were undertaken were not directly based on the results, findings of the Commission. Also, after the publication of the report on the refugees, the government decided to establish a credit line of 15 million Swiss francs to promote greater awareness of human rights and to contribute to preventing and combating racism and anti-Semitism. So the Commission itself did not find any specific indication of property claims and did not make any recommendation. The results of the Commission have been published, as I said, in several steps. 2 interim reports and then a final report consisting of 25 volumes of studies and a synthesis, published step by step. So the government made official declarations on both interim reports and their conclusions. When the first volume of the final report were published, the government announced that it would wait for the publication of the complete report, so the 25 reports plus the synthesis, before making an official statement. In that context, the group of citizens made the following request to the government by means of a petition. The government has to comment in detail on almost every single issue raised by the report. So a kind of report on the report, or about the report. How should it be achieved? The petitioners had a model here in mind. 10 years or so after the end of World War II, the government had appointed an expert committee to thoroughly study the Swiss policy toward refugees before and during the war. And when the expert report was published, government 3 minutes left. Okay. When the expert report was published, a governmental report was added to it. There was a good reason for in doing so. Those in charge of the refugee policy during the war still hold their position when the report was published. So they had to, or at least better, they had to explain and justify their own attitude in the past. Here the situation was different with the Belgian Commission. And of course, it wouldn't have looked good if the government had first tasked the Commission to examine a long list of topics, only to question the findings after the publication of it. So, government made an official declaration. You can find it on the internet the day of the publication of the synthesis. I will, due to a question of time, skip the questions and the points comparison between official reports on the refugees. State Commission, there were 3 or no. But here only to point out that the Belgian Commission do not, let us say, add new facts with a completely different picture. Okay, I will stop. Thank you.
Unfortunately, there is no time for questions to this very, very informative and interesting presentation. I guess